Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through time, where the murky waters of the past reflect eternal truths about human dignity. This is the story of a young woman whose heart held freedom even when her body did not, a narrative that teaches us that true emancipation is born first in the soul before it blossoms in the world. Tell me in the comments, where are you all watching from? What city? What state? What country? I love getting to know you who follow these stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps me a lot to continue bringing these narratives that touch our souls. Now, prepare your hearts for a journey. Year 1843, Vertical Bar, Campos dos Goitacazes, Province of Rio de Janeiro, Empire of Brazil. The sound of ivory keys echoed through the great house like crystal tears falling on dark velvet. Isaura's fingers glided over the Chopin melody, with the same delicacy with which the afternoon breeze caressed the French silk curtains. Her eyes, the color of golden honey, reflected a light that contrasted with her fair skin, a maternal inheritance that made her a living enigma in that society of absolute contrasts. The 18-year-old girl did not yet know that her existence was a contradiction incarnate. The daughter of the late Commander Almeida and Juliana, a mulatto slave of singular beauty who had died in childbirth. Raised by the kind Donna Esmeralda, the commander's wife, Isaura had received the education of a court lady, piano, French, embroidery, literature, without ever fully understanding her condition. The house breathed history in every corner. Portraits of ancestors watched mutely from the European wallpaper-lined walls. The scent of jasmine wafted in through the stained glass windows, mingling with the lavender perfume that Donna Esmeralda sprayed on the Irish linen sheets. Miguel, the grey-haired black gardener, would always stop his work whenever he heard Isaura play. His eyes held a secret that weighed like lead in his chest. He was her biological father, not the deceased commander. But Juliana had taken that secret to her grave, and Miguel had chosen silence out of love for her memory and for the protection of his daughter. On that March afternoon, Malvina, the young wife of the current owner, Leoncio, approached the piano. Her steps were light on the rosewood floor, and her organza dress whispered unsaid promises. "Isaura, my dear." Her voice was music itself. "I need to tell you something important." The melody ceased. Isaura raised her eyes, and in them, Malvina saw a purity that moved her to tears. How could this angelic creature live under the yoke of slavery? "Señora Malvina, I promised Donna Esmeralda, on her deathbed, that I would see to your freedom. I will speak with my husband about it soon." A timid smile blossomed on Isaura's lips like a rose opening to the first morning sun. She did not know that at that very moment, Leoncio was watching from the doorway, and that in his eyes grew an obsession that would forever change the fate of everyone in that house. The night wind rustled the curtains, carrying omens that no heart present could decipher. Leoncio's return to the plantation brought more than just luggage from his business trips. It brought a heavy air, laden with undeclared intentions that seemed to alter even the quality of the light filtering through the windows of the great house. Enrique, Leoncio's brother-in-law, had arrived with him, a man of elegant gestures and a calculating gaze. Tall and slender, he had the dangerous charm of those who know how to use words as instruments of seduction. Upon seeing Isaura for the first time, as she served him coffee in a Sèvres porcelain cup, he felt the same impact as one who beholds a rare work of art in an unexpected place. "Leoncio, this young woman," Enrique murmured, watching Isaura walk away with natural grace. "She is an inheritance from the commander, educated as a lady, but—" Leoncio did not finish the sentence, but his eyes spoke for him. In them, there was a hunger that could not be sated by food. The days that followed turned into a subtle game of glances and advances. Leoncio began to find pretexts to be near Isaura, asking her to play the piano after dinner, requesting that she organize the library, inventing tasks that kept her in his vicinity. Malvina noticed the change in her husband's behavior with the feminine intuition that rarely fails. Her eyes, once bright with marital happiness, began to cloud over with suspicion and sadness. During meals, she watched Leoncio's hands tremble slightly when Isaura approached to serve the table. One evening, as the April rain drummed on the Portuguese tiles, Malvina found Leoncio in the library. He pretended to read, but his eyes followed every movement of Isaura, who was reorganizing the volumes of French literature on the mahogany shelf. "Leoncio," Malvina's voice came out more fragile than she intended. I believe the time has come to discuss Isaura's freedom. The man looked up abruptly, like someone waking from a deep dream. For an instant, Malvina saw in him the gentle man she had married, but it was only an instant. Freedom? He laughed with a bitterness that cut the air like a sharp blade. Malvina, you do not understand the business of this house. Isaura is a valuable investment. Henrique, observing the scene from the leather armchair, smiled almost imperceptibly. He too had developed an interest in the young woman, but in a different way. He saw in her an opportunity to destabilize the house's equilibrium for his own benefit. Isaura, oblivious to the tensions her presence caused, continued to organize the books. But when her fingers touched a copy of Paul et Virginie, she felt a strange melancholy take hold of her chest, as if she sensed that storms were approaching her hitherto protected life. That same night, Miguel found her in the garden, contemplating the stars among the foliage of the centenary mango trees. The full moon bathed her in silvery light, making her look like an ethereal apparition. "Child," he said in a low voice heavy with paternal concern, "I feel that changes are coming, changes that may force us to make difficult decisions." Isaura turned to him with innocent curiosity, not understanding the prophetic weight of those words. But something in Miguel's eyes made her heart race, as if a shadow had passed over her soul. May arrived, bringing winds that seemed to carry secrets through the corridors of the plantation. The great house, once a haven of harmony, had turned into a stage for silent tensions that grew like poisonous plants in the humidity of the unsaid. Leoncio had become another man. His eyes followed Isaura with a disturbing intensity, and he invented increasingly elaborate pretexts to be in her presence. He ordered her to take over the organization of his private office, a place where previously only Malvina had access. On these occasions, he would draw near under the pretext of showing documents, and Isaura felt the heat of his presence like embers that burned without consuming. One afternoon, as she was arranging papers on the rosewood desk, Leoncio closed the door behind him. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed like a funeral bell in the young woman's ears. "Isaura," his voice came out hoarse, laden with intentions she could not name. "Do you understand your position in this house?" She looked up, confused. Her natural beauty had intensified with the arrival of adulthood, and her every gesture was an involuntary poetry that stirred men and provoked jealousy in women. "I am grateful for everything I have been given, sir. The education, the affection of Donna Esmeralda." "Forget Donna Esmeralda," he approached, and Isaura smelled the aroma of his imported perfume mixed with something more primitive, animalistic. "She is dead. Malvina has no authority over you. I am your owner, do you understand? Your absolute master." The words fell upon Isaura like invisible lashes. For the first time in her sheltered life, the reality of her condition was revealed in all its crudeness. She was not a daughter of the house. She was not a protégée. She was property. Henrique, who was listening from behind the door, smiled with satisfaction. The dynamics of the house were changing as he had planned, and soon he would be able to take advantage of the situation. That night, Malvina found Isaura crying in the room she occupied in the renovated senzala. Tears streamed silently down her face like sad dew on white rose petals. "My dear, what happened?" "Señora Malvina," Isaura murmured between sobs. "Señor Leoncio told me that I would never be more than a slave. I always believed that." "Listen to me." Malvina held her hands with maternal tenderness. "It doesn't matter what he says. Inside your heart you are free, and I swear by all that is sacred that I will find a way to make that freedom legal." But Malvina's words of comfort came too late to Miguel's ears. The old gardener, who had been observing events with growing alarm, understood that the time to act had come. For years he had kept silent about Isaura's true parentage, but now he realized that this silence could cost him his daughter in a way more terrible than the truth. In the early hours of the next morning, as the dew covered the gardens like a mournful bride's veil, Miguel made a decision that would change both their destinies. He approached Isaura's room and whispered through the slightly open window, "Child, prepare only what is necessary. Tonight, when the moon hides behind the clouds, we will leave this house, never to return." Isaura awoke completely, her heart beating like a war drum. Something in Miguel's tone told her there was no time for questions. The moment had simply arrived to choose between dangerous freedom and a gilded cage. And for the first time in her life, Isaura chose the unknown. The May night enveloped the plantation like a black cloak embroidered with stars. Isaura packed only a few clothes in a cloth bundle, along with the silver crucifix Donna Esmeralda had given her on her deathbed and a handful of coins saved from small sewing jobs she did for the neighbors. Miguel had prepared everything in absolute silence. For weeks, he had secretly sold some personal belongings and negotiated passage on a small boat that traveled up the Paraíba River to the north. He had known the boat's owner since his youth and knew he would not ask inconvenient questions. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when even the crickets seemed to sigh in their sleep, father and daughter met at the wooden pier built for loading sugar. The dark waters of the river reflected the waning moon like a tear-stained mirror. "Child," Miguel whispered, helping her aboard. "From now on, we are no longer runaway slaves. We are a free father and daughter in search of a dignified life." The boatman, a man aged by the waters and the winds, gave a discreet nod. His calloused hands guided the vessel upriver with the expertise of one who knows every curve, every rock, every whisper of the nocturnal waters. Isaura watched the great house shrink in the distance until it became just a light smudge in the dark landscape. She felt a strange pain in her chest, a mixture of relief and longing. She was leaving behind everything she knew: the grand piano, the French books, the garden where she picked jasmine to perfume her hair, and Malvina with her sincere kindness. But she carried with her something more valuable: hope. The journey lasted 3 days. They slept in small riverside villages, where Miguel introduced Isaura as the daughter of a deceased merchant, a story that the young woman's refined education made believable. She spoke with natural elegance, and her delicate manners impressed all who met her. When they finally arrived in Recife, the city welcomed them with sounds, scents, and colors that seemed to come from a tropical dream. The port bustled with activity: ships of various nationalities, merchants shouting their wares, slaves carrying sacks of sugar and cotton. But there were also free people, mulattoes and blacks, who walked with dignity through the Portuguese cobblestone streets. Miguel rented a small house in the São José neighborhood, far from the center but decent and clean. With the remaining savings, he bought simple but elegant clothes for Isaura and some basic furniture. She took the name Elvira, and he became known as Dom Anselmo, a retired merchant. The transformation was remarkable. Free from the tensions of the plantation, Isaura, now Elvira, blossomed like a plant, finally receiving adequate sunlight. Her eyes regained their natural sparkle, and she discovered that she could walk the streets with her head held high, greet people without asking permission, and choose what and when to eat. One morning, while buying fabric at the market, a familiar melody reached her ears. Someone was playing the piano in a nearby house. Without thinking, she began to hum the same tune, a Viennese waltz she had learned in her days at the great house. A young man passing by stopped, impressed by the crystalline purity of her voice. Tall, with brown hair and coffee-colored eyes, he was dressed with the discreet elegance of one who possesses a refined education without the need for ostentation. "Pardon me, miss," he said, tipping his hat in a gallant gesture. "I couldn't help but overhear." "Your voice is exceptional." Isaura blushed delicately, unaware that she had just met Álvaro de Sá, a young lawyer and abolitionist, son of one of Recife's most respected families, and that this chance encounter would trigger a series of events that would lead her to both the heaven and hell of human experience. June brought a special sweetness to Recife, as if the city itself conspired for love to blossom between two souls destined to meet. Álvaro de Sá became a constant presence in the life of the young woman he knew as Elvira, always visiting her under gentle pretexts. He brought books he thought might interest her, flowers picked from his own garden, musical scores he had obtained from European friends. Isaura discovered in him a kindred spirit she had never imagined she could find. Álvaro spoke with passion about justice, equality among men, and natural rights that no human law should deny. His eyes shone when he talked about a future Brazil, where the color of one's skin would not determine one's destiny. "Elvira," he said one afternoon as they walked along Boa Viagem Beach, "I believe there is a higher power that guides certain people to find each other. When I first saw you, I felt as if my soul had recognized yours from time immemorial." She lowered her eyes, feeling her heart flutter like a startled bird. No man had ever spoken words of love to her, and she was discovering that this feeling was like new music playing in her chest, a melody she didn't know existed but recognized instantly. "Señor Álvaro," she murmured, not knowing how to express the whirlwind of emotions that swept over her. "Just Álvaro. There should be no formalities between us." Miguel watched the growing affection between the young people with conflicting feelings. On one hand, he saw his daughter flourishing like a rose, finally receiving proper care. On the other, he feared that the discovery of Isaura's true identity would destroy this budding love. One evening, as she embroidered by candlelight and he smoked his pipe on the small porch, Miguel decided to broach the subject. "Child, we need to talk about this young man." "Father," she had always called him that, even without knowing the biological truth. "Alvaro is different from anyone I have ever met. He sees the world as it could be, not just as it is. But he doesn't know our true story. What if one day he finds out?" "If it is meant to be," she answered with a wisdom that surprised the old man, "true love will withstand any revelation." Alvaro, for his part, confided his feelings to his closest friend, Dr. Antonio, a physician and fellow abolitionist. "I have found the woman I wish to marry," he told him, as they drank Portuguese wine in a tavern by the port. "And who is this fortunate lady?" "Elvira, a young woman of humble origins but refined education. There is something about her, Antonio, a natural dignity that surpasses that of many ladies of high society." Dr. Antonio smiled, but his experienced eyes caught nuances in his friend's description that intrigued him. Humble origins, refined education, an appearance that defied simple social classifications. His medical and humanitarian experience made him suspect there was more to this young woman's story. The month progressed with daily meetings between the lovers. Alvaro took Isaura to the theater, where she watched a full opera for the first time. Her emotional reaction, with silent tears running down her face as the singers performed La Traviata, touched him deeply. "You feel music like few others," he murmured, offering her his linen handkerchief. "Music has always been my secret language," she confessed. "When I play or sing, it's as if my soul flies free from all bonds." That night, walking through the streets lit by oil lamps, Alvaro made a decision that would change both their destinies. "Elvira, there is something I must tell you." She stopped, her heart pounding, sensing that important words were coming. "I love you, and I would like to ask for your hand in marriage." The full moon witnessed the first kiss between two souls who recognized each other beyond the conventions of their time, but who did not yet know how arduous the path would be to turn love into a shared destiny. July brought winds of change that seemed to whisper warnings through the corners of Recife's colonial houses. Alvaro insisted on introducing Elvira to society, especially to the abolitionist friends who shared his progressive ideas. She gently resisted, claiming shyness, but Miguel perceived the real reason, the instinct for self-preservation that develops in those who have always lived on the fringes of official society. "My dear," Alvaro argued one afternoon as they walked through the San Jose market, "you must not hide your light under a bushel. You possess a culture, intelligence, and sensitivity that rival any court lady. Why deprive yourself of the social life that is rightfully yours?" "Alvaro, she hesitated, choosing her words as one walks through a minefield. "I don't feel ready. My simple origins ennoble those who overcome them through character," he interrupted with fervor. "I would 1,000 times prefer your authenticity to the artificiality of many women born with a silver spoon." As they talked, a coarse-looking man watched them from a distance. Martinho, a slave trader known for his questionable methods, had eyes trained to identify fugitive merchandise. Something in the young woman's elegant yet cautious posture aroused his professional attention. That night, Martinho carefully reviewed the wanted posters that arrived regularly from various provinces. His finger stopped on an illustration that made his eyes gleam with greed. "Wanted, fugitive slave, name Isaura, fair skin, brown hair, educated, plays the piano, generous reward." "Interesting," he muttered, mentally comparing the image to the young woman he had seen at the market. In the house in San Jose, Isaura awoke in the middle of the night with a strange feeling of being watched. She went to the window and saw a shadow moving away quickly down the narrow street. Miguel, who had slept little since their escape, also noticed the strange presence. "Child," he whispered, "I believe our tranquility is coming to an end." "What do you mean, father?" "There are too many eyes watching us. Perhaps it is time for us to think about leaving again." "But Alvaro," the name escaped her lips like a desperate prayer, "if he truly loves you, he will find a way to follow you." Meanwhile, at the great house in Campos dos Goytacases, Leoncio was receiving reports from henchmen sent to the main cities of the north. His obsession with Isaura had grown into a mania that consumed his days and tormented his nights. Malvina, perceiving her husband's mental deterioration, had locked herself in her rooms, refusing to participate in the manhunt her home had become. "Sir," said one of the men sent to Recife, "we have found promising leads. A very beautiful, educated mulatto girl is living in the São José neighborhood, with an older man who passes as her father." Leoncio rose from his armchair like a wounded animal sniffing its prey. "Are you sure it's her? The characteristics match perfectly. And there's more. She is courting a young man from local society, an abolitionist lawyer." The laugh that escaped Leoncio's throat sent a shiver even down the henchman's spine. It was a sound without humor, filled with a malice that fed on its own frustration. Prepare everything for the journey. And hire that Martinho they spoke of, a local merchant who knows the most effective methods for recovering fugitive property. The next morning, Álvaro arrived at the house in São José with an invitation that would change everything. "Elvira, my love, you would do me the greatest honor by accepting to accompany me to a soirée at the Baron of Suassuna's house. There will be music, literature, and you will be able to show your artistic talents to people who will truly appreciate them." Isara looked at Miguel, who shook his head, almost imperceptibly, but the love she felt for Álvaro spoke louder than prudence. "I accept," she said, unknowingly sealing the fate of everyone involved in this drama being woven between love and freedom, between the past that pursued her and the future she dared to dream of. The night of the soirée at the Baron of Suassuna's mansion arrived, enveloped in the fragrance of jasmine and expectations that seemed to float in the air like golden butterflies. Isaura wore her best dress, a dark blue silk that enhanced her honey-colored eyes and contrasted softly with her fair skin. Miguel had helped her arrange her hair in an elegant style, using a mother-of-pearl comb he had managed to buy with careful savings. "You look beautiful," Álvaro murmured when he came to fetch her, offering his arm with a gallantry that made her heart race. The Baron's mansion impressed Isaura with its understated grandeur. Baccarat crystal chandeliers illuminated salons where French furniture coexisted with Brazilian works of art. Recife's high society was represented in its finest. Magistrates, prosperous merchants, intellectuals, and several high society ladies, adorned with jewels that caught and reflected the light in 1,000-colored sparks. "Elvira," said Álvaro, guiding her through the groups engaged in lively conversation, "I would like to introduce you to our host." The Baron of Suassuna, a middle-aged man with a perfectly trimmed grey beard, received her with genuine courtesy. "Miss Elvira, Álvaro has spoken so much of your musical talents that we are anxious to hear you." "Your Excellency is very kind," she replied, with a naturalness that impressed everyone present. For the first hour, Isaura moved through the soirée with natural grace, discussing French literature with the judge's wife and debating painting techniques with an artist newly arrived from Europe. Her refined education and artistic sensitivity won her admirers, and many whispered complimentary remarks about Álvaro's discovery. But at a distant table, near the windows overlooking the garden, Martinho watched the young woman's every move with the eyes of a predator confirming the identity of its prey. Beside him, an elegant but calculating-looking man took discreet notes in a small, leather-bound notebook. "It's her, without a doubt," Martinho muttered. "The characteristics perfectly match the poster." "Let us wait for the opportune moment," his companion replied. "A public denunciation will have a greater impact." When the musical part of the evening arrived, the Baron requested that Isaura perform at the Pleyel grand piano positioned in the center of the main salon. She chose a Chopin composition she knew by heart, and her fingers glided over the keys with a mastery that drew sighs of admiration from the guests. But it was when she began to sing a popular Brazilian song, adapting the melody with ornaments of her own creation, that the true impact occurred. Her voice soared through the salon's air like a bird with golden plumage, touching hearts and bringing tears to eyes unaccustomed to aesthetic emotion. The applause was warm, prolonged, and sincere. Álvaro beamed with pride, and for the first time in her life, she felt the public recognition of her talents. For a few minutes, she completely forgot the dangers that surrounded her. It was then that Martinho stood up, walking toward the center of the salon with theatrically slow steps. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cut through the air like a sharp blade, "I regret to interrupt this cultural evening, but my duty as a citizen compels me to make an important revelation." A heavy silence fell upon the salon. Isaura felt the blood run cold in her veins, sensing the imminent catastrophe. "This young woman you have just applauded," Martino continued, pointing an accusing finger at her, "is not the Miss Elvira she presents herself as. She is Isaura, a fugitive slave from the plantation of Señor Leoncio de Almeida in Campos dos Goytacases." The impact of the words was like a bomb exploding in the silence. Faces turned pale, fans fluttered nervously, and murmurs of shock rippled through the salon like waves in a lake disturbed by a thrown stone. Álvaro stepped forward, his face transfigured by indignation. "Sir, how dare you make such a baseless accusation? I have the official poster right here." Martino displayed the paper with cruel satisfaction. "And I have already sent a message to the owner who should be on his way." Isaura remained by the piano, motionless as a marble statue, but her eyes sought Álvaro's across the salon. In them, he read a truth that his heart had already sensed, but that his mind had refused to accept. And at that moment, as Recife's society processed the scandal that would turn their cultural evening into social gossip, true love was put to the cruelest test there is, the confrontation with realities that challenge all the conventions of the world we live in. The silence that followed Martino's accusation was broken by the sound of a glass shattering on the marble floor. A nervous lady had dropped her champagne flute. The noise seemed to awaken the assembly from its trance of shock, and the salon immediately erupted in scandalized murmurs. Isaura remained by the piano, as dignified as a dethroned princess, but Álvaro saw in her eyes a pain that broke his heart. Without hesitation, he walked over to her, took her delicate hand in his, and faced the entire assembled society. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice echoed clear and firm through the salon, "even if this accusation is true, it does not alter one fundamental fact. I have the honor of standing beside the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." "Álvaro, no," Isaura whispered, trying to pull her hand away, but he held it with firm tenderness. "Elvira Isaura, the name does not matter," he continued, now addressing her directly. "You are the person I have chosen to love, and that choice does not depend on legal papers or social conventions." The Baron of Suasuna approached, more concerned with the well-being of his guests than with social scandals. "Señor Martino," he said with authority, "I believe it would be more appropriate to resolve this matter outside of my house, in a civilized manner." "With all due respect, Your Excellency," Martino retorted, "the law is clear regarding the fate of fugitive slaves, and the legal owner has already been notified." Miguel, who was waiting anxiously at the house in São José, sensed that something terrible was happening as the hours passed without news. His fears were confirmed when a neighbor came to tell him about the commotion at the Baron's mansion. In the salon, Álvaro confronted Martino with the courage of one fighting for his beloved. What would be the price to purchase this young woman's freedom? "That must be discussed with the legal owner," Martino replied with a cruel smile. "And I believe he has no interest in selling her." Dr. Antonio, who had witnessed the entire scene, approached his friend. "Álvaro, I have been your friend for years. Are you sure about what you are doing?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," he replied, not letting go of Isaura's hand. "True love does not choose skin color, social status, or circumstances of birth. It chooses the soul." Isaura, who had remained silent until then, finally found her voice. "Álvaro, you do not understand the consequences, not just for me, but for you. Your career, your social standing." "What are social standing and career worth if I cannot share them with the one I love?" he replied, delicately kissing her hand in front of all the guests. The gesture caused a new uproar. Some ladies withdrew in scandal, but others, touched by the sincerity of the love demonstrated, remained watching with teary eyes. Martino, seeing that he was losing control of the situation, decided to accelerate his plans. "The discussion is interesting, but the law is not impressed by sentimentality. This woman will be returned to her owner, as determined by the right of property." It was then that the sound of carriages stopping in front of the mansion was heard. Through the windows, lanterns could be seen swaying in the darkness and figures descending from elegant vehicles. "I believe Señor Leoncio has just arrived," Martino announced, with a satisfaction he could not hide. Isaura closed her eyes, breathing deeply like one preparing to face a devastating storm. When she opened them again, Álvaro saw in them a strength he had not known, the dignity of those who, even in adverse circumstances, refuse to surrender their soul. "I will face what is to come," she said in a low but firm voice. "But I want you to know that these months by your side have been the happiest of my life." The salon door opened, and Leoncio entered, followed by two henchmen and a man who appeared to be a lawyer. His eyes scanned the room until they found Isaura, and the smile that formed on his lips made even Martinho feel an involuntary chill. The final confrontation was about to begin, and all present realized they were witnessing something much greater than a simple legal matter. At stake was the very definition of what it means to be human in a society that still treated people as property. Leoncio strode into the salon like a conqueror, reclaiming lost territory. His eyes, feverish with satisfied obsession, swept the room until they fixed on Isaura, with an intensity that made many of the guests look away, instinctively understanding they were witnessing something improper and disturbing. "My dear Isaura," his voice was honeyed but laden with veiled threats. "What a relief to find you safe and sound. Imagine my concern when I discovered you had gotten lost." Alvaro stepped forward, protectively positioning himself between Leoncio and Isaura. "Sir, I believe there is a misunderstanding. This young woman is under my protection." "Protection?" Leoncio laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Young man, you are interfering in matters you do not understand. Isaura is my legal property, duly registered and documented." The lawyer accompanying Leoncio opened a leather briefcase and displayed official papers. "All the documents are in order," he declared in a bureaucratic tone. "The slave Isaura is the legitimate property of Señor Leoncio de Almeida, as per the inheritance deed from the late commander." "Papers do not define the human soul," Alvaro retorted with passion. "This woman possesses an education, sensitivity, and dignity that surpass those of many born free. An education that I paid for," Leoncio interrupted, approaching dangerously. "Everything she is, she owes to me. And the time has come to settle that debt." Isaura, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Her voice came out clear, without a tremor, filled with a dignity that no circumstance could break. "Señor Leoncio, I have always served your house with dedication. If I made the mistake of seeking freedom, it was only because I could not accept certain conditions you intended to impose on me." The subtext of her words was understood by everyone present. Indignant murmurs began to spread through the salon, especially among the ladies, who perfectly understood what conditions Isaura was referring to. "Conditions?" Leoncio feigned misunderstanding, but his eyes glinted with malice. "A slave has no right to accept or refuse anything. She only has the duty to obey." "Sir," the Baron of Suasuna's voice cut the air like a whip. "This is my house, and I will not tolerate such talk in front of my female guests." "With all due respect, Your Excellency," said Leoncio's lawyer, "we are merely exercising legal rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the Empire." It was then that Dr. Antonio, who had been observing the scene with the physician's attention, noticed something important. He approached Alvaro and whispered, "Look at his eyes. It's not normal greed. It's a pathological obsession. This man is sick." Alvaro looked again at Leoncio and saw that his friend was right. There was something unnatural in the way the plantation owner looked at Isaura, not as a master to a slave, nor even as a man to a woman, but as a collector to a rare piece he believes he possesses. "Señor Leoncio," said Alvaro, changing his strategy, "I am a man of means. How much would you ask for this young woman's manumission?" "She is not for sale." The answer was immediate and final. "Some things cannot be bought, young man. Some things belong to their owners in a permanent way." The tone with which he pronounced the word permanent made Isaura turn pale. She understood that she was not dealing with legal or financial issues, but with a sick fixation that would not yield to rational arguments. Martinho, seeing an opportunity to accelerate events, intervened. "Gentlemen, the law is clear. The fugitive slave must be returned to her owner. And there is the matter of the reward for her capture. A reward that will be generously paid," Leoncio confirmed, taking out a purse of gold coins. "But now, I believe it is time for us to depart." "No," Alvaro blocked the path. "I will not allow you to take this woman against her will." "A slave's will has no legal value," the lawyer said coldly. "But it has moral value," Alvaro countered. "And before God, all men are equal." The confrontation had reached its peak. In the tense silence that followed, everyone realized they were witnessing more than a dispute over a person. At stake was the clash between two worlds, two visions of humanity, two completely opposite concepts of what dignity and freedom mean. And Isaura, at the center of this epic battle, prepared to make a decision that would not only change her destiny, but would define what kind of person she would choose to be in the face of the most extreme adversity. In the tension-filled silence that dominated the Baron's salon, Isora took a step forward. Her posture was that of a queen who, even dethroned, would never lose her royal dignity. All eyes converged on her, awaiting the words that would define the course of that epic confrontation. "Alvaro," she said, turning to the man she loved with eyes shimmering with unshed tears, "you gave me the most precious gift one can receive, true and unconditional love. For that reason, I cannot allow you to destroy your life for my sake." "Elvira, Isora," he whispered, understanding what she intended to do. "Señor Leoncio," she addressed the plantation owner with a firm voice, "I will go with you, but I make one demand." The man raised his eyebrows, surprised by the young woman's audacity in imposing conditions. "Miguel, my adoptive father, did nothing but protect me. I demand that he be freed from any consequences for my escape." "And why should I accept demands from a fugitive slave?" Leoncio asked with sarcasm. "Because if you do not accept," Isora lifted her chin defiantly, "I swear there will be no force in this world capable of making me cooperate with anything. You may take my body, but you will never have my voluntary submission." The threat was uttered with such conviction that even Leoncio hesitated. He had known Isora for years and knew that behind her delicate appearance was a willpower that, once decided, became unshakable. Dr. Antonio approached Alvaro and whispered urgently, "My friend, accept the situation for now, but I promise we will find a legal way to resolve this. I know lawyers in Rio de Janeiro who specialize in manumission cases." Alvaro nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding that physical resistance would only make the situation worse for Isora. "Very well," said Leoncio after a brief reflection. "I accept your demand regarding the old man, but you will come with me now, without further delay. One last thing." Isora turned to Alvaro one last time. "Promise me that you will not give up on your abolitionist ideals. Let my situation become fuel for your fight, not ashes that extinguish it." "I promise," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion, "and I swear I will find a way to free you legally." "If it is God's will," she whispered, "our paths will cross again." Leoncio, impatient with the scene he considered overly melodramatic, signaled to his henchmen. They approached Isora respectfully. Her education and natural dignity commanded respect even in those circumstances. As she passed Alvaro on her way out, he discreetly took her hand and pressed something small into her palm, a gold ring with a small emerald that had belonged to his mother. "So that you remember, there are people who see you as you deserve to be seen," he murmured. She closed her fingers over the ring, hiding it in the folds of her dress, and left the mansion with her head held high, followed by Leoncio and his men. The salon fell into absolute silence for several minutes after her departure. Many of the guests felt they had witnessed something profoundly significant, not just the personal drama of a young slave, but a lesson in human dignity that none of them would ever forget. Alvaro remained motionless by the piano, where she had sung hours before, gazing at the keys that still held the warmth of her fingers. Dr. Antonio approached and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We will work day and night to resolve this situation," he promised, "but we need to be smart, to use the law to our advantage." "And what if we don't succeed in time?" Alvaro asked, with poorly concealed desperation. "We will," Dr. Antonio replied, with a conviction he did not entirely feel. True love always finds a way. Meanwhile, in the carriage moving away through the dark streets of Recife, Isora looked out the window at the lights of the city that had given her the happiest moments of her life. Alvaro's ring burned in her hand like a small but comforting ember, tangible proof that there was someone in the world capable of loving her exactly as she was. And however uncertain her future might be, she carried in her chest a certainty that no circumstance could shake. She had tasted what it was to be truly loved, and that experience had transformed her forever, giving her an inner strength that no adversity could break. The return journey to Campos dos Goytacases took place in a heavy silence, broken only by the noise of the carriage wheels on the cobblestones of the colonial roads and the occasional neighing of the horses. Isaura sat upright on the upholstered bench, looking out the small window with a serene expression that deeply irritated Leoncio. He had expected to find her broken, submissive, begging for forgiveness. Instead, he was faced with a woman who seemed to have grown during her months of freedom, acquiring an inner dignity that no external circumstance could shake. "I hope you enjoyed your excursion," he said with sarcasm, trying to provoke a reaction. "Enjoyed is an understatement," she replied calmly. "I discovered who I truly am." The unexpected response annoyed him even more. For years he had been accustomed to the shy and obedient Isaura of the great house. This new version, strengthened by the experience of love and freedom, completely destabilized his plans for domination. When they arrived at the plantation at the end of the third day, Malvina was waiting on the porch of the great house. Her eyes filled with tears upon seeing Isaura alight from the carriage, not with relief as Leoncio had hoped, but with deep sadness at seeing the freedom of the young woman she had come to regard almost as a daughter cut short. "Isaura, my dear," she murmured, approaching with open arms. "Senora Malvina," Isaura returned the hug with genuine tenderness. "How well you look. Goodness always preserves beauty." "Enough of this sentimentality," Leoncio interrupted abruptly. "Isaura has much accumulated work to make up for her months of idleness." Miguel came running from the back of the house, where he tended the gardens. His eyes lit up at the sight of his daughter, but they quickly clouded with worry as he noticed the look of malicious triumph on Leoncio's face. "Father," Isaura smiled at him, conveying with her gaze that she was well and would endure whatever came her way. "Child, thank God you are back," he murmured, embracing her discreetly. "Miguel," said Leoncio, "you also have a punishment to serve. 3 months in the field hands Senzala, to learn not to betray your master's trust." "No," Isaura intervened firmly. "We had an agreement. Miguel was to be spared any punishment." "And he will be spared prison or the whip," Leoncio replied with a cruel smile, "but not the work appropriate to his new situation." That first night back, Isaura was locked in the room she had occupied in her youth, but which now had bars on the windows. Lying on the narrow bed, she clutched Alvaro's ring to her chest and whispered words of hope to herself. "He will come for me," she murmured, "or he will find a legal way to free me." But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, with no news from Recife. Leoncio had bribed the local post to intercept any correspondence addressed to her, and he gradually tried to convince her that Alvaro had forgotten her. "You see how the love of white men is fleeting," he would say during forced visits to his office. "He is probably already courting some young lady of his own social class." "I knew Alvaro's heart," she would invariably reply, "and I know he would never give up on me for social superficialities." Isaura's mental resistance began to exhaust even Leoncio's patience. He had tried different strategies, promises of better treatment in exchange for submission, veiled threats, isolation, excessive work. Nothing could break the young woman's spirit. It was then that he conceived a more elaborate and cruel plan. "Isaura," he said one October morning, "I received a letter from your precious Alvaro." She looked up quickly, unable to hide the hope that sprang into her heart. "A letter?" "Yes. He writes that, after reflecting on your true condition, he understood that it would not be appropriate to maintain a relationship with a slave. He apologizes for the misunderstanding and informs me that he will soon be engaged to a young lady from a good Recife family." Isaura turned pale, but her voice was firm. "I would like to see this letter." "Unfortunately," Leoncio feigned regret, "I inadvertently burned it, but you already know the essential part." "I don't believe you," she said simply. "You don't believe me?" He laughed. "Well, you should know that not only has Alvaro forgotten you, but he also sent money to compensate for the costs of your capture. See how true love manifests itself." And he displayed a sum of money, which had indeed come from Alvaro, but not as compensation, rather as the first installment of an amount he was carefully saving to buy Isaura's freedom. But this time, the well-constructed lie managed to plant a seed of doubt in the young woman's heart. For the first time since her return, a single tear slid down her face, as she wondered if her true love had been nothing more than an illusion of someone who desperately wanted to believe in human goodness. December brought torrential rains to the plantation, turning the gardens into mirrors of water and making the foliage whisper ancient secrets to the wind. Isaura, weakened by months of confinement and excessive work, still maintained a dignity that deeply irritated Leoncio. The plantation owner realized he needed a different strategy. All attempts to break the young woman's spirit through lies, isolation, or forced labor had failed. It was then that he devised his most Machiavellian plan. "Isaura," he said one morning, as she was organizing the library, "the time has come to accept the reality of your situation." "I accepted it long ago," she replied without looking up from the books. "Not completely. You still harbor impossible hopes of freedom or rescue. It is time to think more practically." "What do you mean?" "I intend to marry you off." The revelation made Isaura drop the book she was holding. She turned to him with an expression of disbelief. "Marry me? To Belchior, my new gardener, a hard-working, obedient man who will know how to keep a wife in her proper place. Isaura knew Belchior, a middle-aged man with a rough appearance and coarse manners, hired specifically by Leoncio for his reputation of treating women with brutality. The prospect of a union with such a person was more terrible than any physical punishment. Never, she said with a firmness that surprised even herself. You are not in a position to refuse, Leoncio replied coldly. The ceremony will be performed next Sunday by the local priest, and this time there will be no possible escape. That night, Isaura knelt by the small barred window and looked at the stars shining between the heavy clouds. My God, she whispered, if there is any purpose in my suffering, give me the strength to endure what is to come. But if it is possible, show me a path that preserves my dignity. The next day, Malvina secretly sought her out, bringing news that rekindled the flame of hope in Isaura's heart. My dear, she murmured in a low voice, I managed to send a letter to Recife through a trusted merchant. Alvaro is alive, well, and working day and night to find a legal solution to your situation. Then the letters Leoncio showed me were false. Alvaro would never abandon you. He is saving money and looking for lawyers specializing in manumission cases. The revelation brought immense relief, but also renewed desperation. If Alvaro was truly working for her freedom, the forced marriage would destroy any hope of a future reunion. Senora Malvina, I must prevent this ceremony. How? Leoncio has already made all the arrangements. The priest will come on Sunday, and Belchior is eager for the wedding. Then there is only one alternative left, Isaura murmured, unconsciously touching Alvaro's ring, which she kept hidden in a small seam of her dress. What alternative? To trust that true love always finds a way to win. For the rest of the week, Isaura behaved in a strangely calm manner, as if she had accepted her fate. Leoncio was pleased, believing he had finally broken her resistance. Miguel, for his part, watched his daughter with growing concern. He knew her too well to believe in her supposed resignation. On Friday, he managed to approach her while working in the gardens. Child, what are you planning? Father, she smiled with a sweet sadness. I have learned that sometimes we must have faith that God writes straight with crooked lines. Sunday will be an important day. Isaura, do not worry. Whatever happens, I will maintain my dignity to the end. On Sunday morning, as she dressed for the forced ceremony, Isaura held Alvaro's ring one last time before hiding it definitively among the threads of her undergarments. If she had to face the worst, she would carry with her the tangible memory of the only true love she had ever known. But destiny, which sometimes amuses itself by playing tricks on human plans, was preparing a surprise for that Sunday that none of those involved could have imagined. The sound of galloping horse hooves on the road leading to the plantation announced that extraordinary changes were about to occur, turning what should have been the worst day of Isaura's life into the beginning of her true liberation. Sunday dawned grey, with heavy clouds threatening a storm, as if the sky itself reflected the drama about to unfold in the small plantation chapel. Isaura wore the white dress Malvina had insisted on lending her, not out of joy, but because even in the worst circumstances, a woman deserved to marry with dignity. Looking at herself in the room's tarnished mirror, she whispered to her reflection, If this is my destiny, may Alvaro at least remember me as someone who fought for her dignity until the end. In the main room, the priest waited uncomfortably. A young and idealistic man, he had been coerced by Leoncio into performing the ceremony, but his conscience ached for participating in a clearly forced union. Belchior, dressed in borrowed clothes that looked grotesque on his coarse figure, smiled in anticipation of possessing the most beautiful woman in the region. It was then that the sound of galloping horses made everyone look toward the window. An elegant carriage was coming up the plantation road at a dangerous speed, raising clouds of red dust. Who could that be? Malvina murmured, her heart quickening with an inexplicable premonition. The carriage stopped abruptly in front of the great house. 3 men descended, Alvaro, Dr. Antonio, and a distinguished-looking gentleman carrying a briefcase of documents. All were dressed in travel clothes, as if they had come from afar in a great hurry. Leoncio turned pale upon recognizing Alvaro, but quickly composed himself. What is the meaning of this intrusion? He asked with forced authority. We are in the middle of a religious ceremony. A ceremony that cannot be concluded, Alvaro replied with a firm voice. At least not before we resolve some pending legal matters. Legal matters? The third man stepped forward and introduced himself. Dr. Joaquim Nabucco de Araujo, a lawyer specializing in civil law. I am here to represent the interests of Señor Álvaro de Sá in a matter concerning the slave Isaura. Isaura is not for sale, Leoncio declared categorically. I did not come to buy her, said Álvaro. I came to claim her. Claim her by what right? Dr. Nabucco opened his briefcase and took out several official documents. Over these past months, we have carefully investigated the documentation regarding the ownership of this plantation and its assets. We discovered something interesting. Leoncio began to show signs of nervousness. Commander Almeida, before his death, incurred several significant debts with banks in Rio de Janeiro, the lawyer continued. Debts that, according to the law, were automatically passed on to his heirs. What debts are these? I never knew of, because the commander kept them secret, hoping to pay them off before his death, but he did not succeed. The total amount, with accrued interest, exceeds the value of this entire property. The impact of the revelation made Leoncio stagger. Álvaro stepped forward. I have bought all of those debts, he announced. I am now the legal creditor of everything on this plantation, including Isaura. That's impossible, Leoncio shouted. Here are the documents, duly registered at the competent notary offices. Dr. Nabucco presented the papers. You have two options. Pay off the debts immediately or lose the property through foreclosure. At that moment, Isaura appeared at the door of the room, still dressed as a bride. Upon seeing Álvaro, her eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. Álvaro, she whispered. My love. He approached, completely ignoring everyone else present. I have come to fulfill my promise. Leoncio, realizing he had completely lost control of the situation, tried one last gamble. Even if this is true, you will not have my consent to— We do not need your consent, Dr. Nabucco interrupted. From this moment on, Señor Álvaro is the legal owner of this plantation and all its assets, including the right to grant manumission to whomever he wishes. Álvaro took a previously prepared document from his pocket. Isaura, he said, kneeling before her in the middle of the room. I did not come here to buy you or possess you. I came to free you completely, and to ask you to marry me out of love, not obligation. He handed her the letter of manumission, the document that would make her officially free. Álvaro, she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched the paper. You did this for me. I did it for us, because I believe that true love knows no barriers when two souls are destined to meet. Leoncio, seeing his plans completely crumble, left the room in silence. Belchior, confused and angry, followed him, muttering. The priest, relieved, blessed the turn of events that his conscience fully approved of. Malvina approached Isaura and hugged her with tears of joy. Finally, my dear, you are free to choose your own destiny. And there, in the room where she had so often served as a slave, Isaura held her letter of manumission and understood that true love really can move mountains, break chains, and transform destinies when two people love each other with enough purity to overcome any obstacle the world imposes on them. 6 months later, on a golden morning in June 1844, the old Almeida plantation had been transformed into something completely new. Álvaro and Isaura, now married before God and the law, had converted the property into a school for the children of free workers, where children of all backgrounds learned together to read, write, and dream of a more just Brazil. Isaura, seated at the piano in the room that had once been the great house's reception hall, played while the children's voices sang in a harmonious choir. Her hands glided over the keys with the same delicacy as always, but now they carried the lightness of someone who was truly free. Miguel, promoted to director of the school's gardens, tended to flowers that bloomed more beautifully than ever, as if they too felt the new energy of freedom that permeated the entire place. Malvina, who had chosen to stay on the property to help with the educational project, organized the children's library with maternal dedication. Álvaro entered the room carrying mail that had just arrived from Rio de Janeiro. My love, he said, gently kissing his wife's forehead, we have good news. The Ministry of Education has approved our proposal to create similar schools in other provinces. It means that other children will have the opportunities I didn't have in my childhood. She smiled, momentarily pausing the music. It means we are building the country we have always dreamed of. Isaura rose from the piano bench and walked to the window overlooking the garden, where children played under the shade of the centenary mango trees. Her hands rested instinctively on her belly, which was beginning to round with the life growing there. Our child will be born into a better world than the one I was born into, she murmured. Our children, Álvaro corrected, embracing her from behind. because this child will be only the first of many blessings God has in store for us. That afternoon, as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the couple walked through the gardens of the old plantation. Where the senzala once stood, there were now airy and colorful classrooms. Where there were once chains, hopes now blossomed. "Sometimes I think," said Isora, "that all the suffering I went through was necessary for us to get here, for us to truly understand the value of freedom and love." "And I think," Alvaro replied, "that some souls are sent to this world with special missions. Yours was to teach that true freedom is born in the heart before it manifests in the world." They stopped before a small monument they had erected in the garden, a simple headstone with the words, "In memory of all those who dreamed of freedom and dignity, may their dreams become reality for future generations." "Has Leoncio accepted the change well?" Isora asked, referring to the former owner, who now lived modestly in a small house in the city. "Better than we expected. Dr. Antonio says that the loss of his sick obsession has allowed him to regain some of his sanity. He even found a job as a clerk in a commercial house. I am glad he has found peace," she said without rancor. "Hate corrodes the soul of the one who carries it." When night fell completely, they returned to the transformed great house. In the living room, Miguel was telling stories to the children who lived at the school, orphans and the children of workers who had found a family and a future there. Isora sat at the piano one last time that day and began to play a melody she had recently composed, music that spoke of hope, overcoming adversity and love that conquers all. As the notes spread through the house like sonorous blessings, every person present understood that they were participating in something greater than their individual lives. They were creating a small world where human dignity was respected regardless of origin, where true love could flourish without prejudice, where children grew up learning that all human beings were brothers and sisters. Years later, when Isora became a grandmother and told her story to her grandchildren, she would always end with the same words. "Always remember, my dears, true freedom is not something others give us, but something we conquer through dignity, perseverance, and the unshakable faith that good always triumphs over evil when we have enough courage to fight for our purest dreams." And so, on a plantation transformed into a school, a slave transformed into an educator, in a love that overcame all the social conventions of its time, Isora's story became an eternal symbol that the human soul, when truly free, can transform the world around it into a place of justice, love, and hope. The piano continued to play late into the night, spreading through the Brazilian night a message that would echo through the centuries. True love, when allied with courage and faith, has the strength to break any chain and build bridges between human hearts, creating a world where all can live with dignity and freedom.